She's infected.
Joel,
Let me see it.
I didn't mean for this.
Show it to me. Oh, Christ.
What if Tess never died? How would Joel's story, Ellie's fate, and the future of humanity be shaped? How would the fate of the entire story be affected? The Last of Us is a masterpiece where every decision turns into a tragedy and every loss becomes a brutal necessity. One of the biggest turning points in this narrative is when Tess, Joel's survival partner, who had kept him balanced for years, learns she is infected and sacrifices herself. This sacrifice leaves Joel with a mission. She entrusts Ellie to him, causing that ruthless armor, frozen by the fear of loss, to crack. But what if things had turned out differently in that dark corridor? Let's turn back time. During that infected attack in the museum, Tess acts a second faster and escapes those deadly teeth at the last moment.
I'm fine.
No bite, no infection, Tess is alive. But would Tess be the only one saved? This single survival creates a butterfly effect, changing dozens of fates and the direction of the entire story. And now we embark on a more pragmatic and perhaps much more dangerous journey with Tess still at the helm. In this scenario where Tess survives, the biggest change would be to the main characters' inner worlds and their relationships with one another. In the original game, Tess's death forced Joel into the seat of leader and decision maker, but while Tess was alive, she was always the one in charge. When we look at Naughty Dog's character designs, Tess is always positioned as the brains and Joel as the brawn. In an interview, Neil Druckmann uses the phrase, "the only authority Joel respects and obeys" for Tess. In this universe, Tess would set the course. She would bargain with Bill, and she would likely have sensed the hunter's trap in Pittsburgh long before Joel. So, wouldn't this have a negative effect on Joel and Ellie's relationship? In the original story, Tess's death was the catalyst that pushed Joel out of his comfort zone, forcing him to take on the responsibility for Ellie all by himself. But with Tess around, Joel wouldn't have had to let his guard down. Rather than carrying that emotional weight, he would have just stayed in a supporting role because Tess was the group's natural leader. She'd make the decisions, chart the course, and likely handle all communication with Ellie. In this scenario, Ellie wouldn't see Joel as a father figure but as a cold, distant protector standing by Tess's side. And Joel would continue to keep his distance from Ellie, seeing her only as cargo that needed to be delivered.
Tess's tough, profit-driven nature would keep feeding Joel's ruthless and protective identity. With her support, he'd maintain the cold-bloodedness from his smuggling days. The ripples from these fractures wouldn't just affect Joel and Ellie, they would completely upend the fate of every character and the balance of the Last of Us universe.
One of the biggest turning points of the first game was undoubtedly the winter chapter. In the original story, when Joel was injured, Ellie had to survive on her own, hunt, and face the horrifying truth of David.
Hello?
This was one of the moments where Ellie lost all her innocence and grew up.
Huh? Well, let me tell you something. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Stop! Stop!
Fucking touch me!
It's okay. It's me. It's me. It's me. Look. It's me.
He tried to...
Oh, baby girl.
But now, let's examine how such an emotional and pivotal moment in the story would have evolved in a completely different direction with Tess by their side. Even if Joel got injured, Tess would never have sent Ellie into the woods alone. She would take the lead, hunt, and ensure their safety. Faced with an experienced smuggler like Tess, David and his cannibal group would never have gotten the chance to abduct Ellie. The moment Tess understood David's intentions, she would have pulled the trigger. The result, Ellie would have been physically safer, but emotionally, she never would have evolved into the strong character we know from The Last of Us. An Ellie who didn't experience the trauma of David, who didn't have to save Joel on her own, would still be a child by the time she reached Salt Lake City in the finale.
And then, the end of the road, the Fireflies Hospital.
This is the place where Tess's presence could ruin everything. Tess isn't much more idealistic than Joel, but she was definitely a much more mission-focused character. At the start of the journey, she was the one who said, "We have to do this, Joel."
This was 3 weeks. I was bitten an hour ago and it's already worse. This is fucking real, Joel. Make this easy for me.
Her belief in the Fireflies' cure was stronger than Joel's. When they arrived at the hospital and Marlene revealed the truth, what would have been Ellie's fate? This is where two distinct possibilities emerge. The first possibility is that despite Tess being alive, Joel would have slowly, unintentionally grown attached to Ellie. Tess could argue that their long journey and the losses they endured shouldn't be for nothing. This could have led us to the most heartbreaking boss fight in gaming history. To save Ellie, Joel would have had to confront not only the Firefly soldiers, but also Tess, his partner of many years. However, even if this confrontation aligned with the darker path Naughty Dog had considered for Tess in early drafts, it was an unlikely outcome in this universe. So what about the other possibility? What if this scenario, the one with a much higher probability of happening, had come into play? In this scenario, Tess's survival would have kept the bond between Joel and Ellie weak from the very beginning. With Tess taking the lead, Joel would never fully take on the emotional responsibility for Ellie, and Ellie would never see Joel as a father figure. By the time they reached the hospital, this distance would become a critical factor. Joel wouldn't be driven by the fear of losing a child for a second time, like in the original story. Tess's mission-focused attitude and her faith in the cure would directly influence Joel's final decision. In a universe like this, Ellie wouldn't be the girl Joel would burn the world for. Instead, she'd be seen as a hope that had to be sacrificed for humanity, and she would have remained on the operating table. We shouldn't forget that it was Marlene herself who handed Ellie over and initiated this journey. Even she, despite all her connections, argued that this sacrifice was unavoidable for the sake of humanity. In a universe where Tess was alive, Joel's psychology would have shifted along a parallel line. Because Tess wasn't just Joel's partner, she was the dominant authority who shaped his priorities. Since Joel wouldn't be as attached to Ellie as in the original story, he would lean toward the more rational approach of Tess and Marlene, rather than his own emotional concerns. He would lean toward the more rational approach of Tess and Marlene. Therefore, it would be perfectly understandable for Joel to see the decision for the cure as a necessary price for humanity. This doesn't mean he wouldn't have valued Ellie,
But Tess's strong influence and Joel's own moral compass would push him to accept this decision for the greater good.
So, wouldn't all of this fundamentally change the revenge story that forms the very foundation of Part 2? Let's think about it. Because Tess is alive, Joel changes his decision at the hospital. Ellie isn't rescued from the surgery, the doctor doesn't die. And this means a completely different story where Abby's journey of revenge never begins. The cure process begins. Instead of a Part 2 driven by personal anger and individual loss, the world is now shaped by the Firefly's efforts to distribute the vaccine. Phaedra's struggle to maintain its authority, the rise of the Fireflies, power struggles between groups, and new ideological divisions come to the forefront. In other words, the story evolves from an emotional tale of revenge into a political conflict. But today, I won't be going into all the details of this parallel universe. That's because I have a much more comprehensive video where I explain how Ellie was taken into surgery, the vaccine was produced, and how the balance of power shifted completely. I highly recommend you watch that video titled "What If Ellie Dies?" You can access it from the link in the description or from the end screen that will appear at the end of the video. Returning to our video, these fractures would radically change not only the narrative, but also the player experience, and all these effects would be directly reflected in the gameplay. In a universe where Tess survived, the gameplay would deviate significantly from the core dynamics of Part 1, because Tess wasn't just a leader of the story, but also a figure who, in practice, shaped the combat and decision-making areas. Therefore, instead of a singular, Joel-focused gameplay, the player would feel a dual play structure constantly guided by Tess's presence. Tess's more aggressive and strategic nature would push the player toward much bolder, riskier, and more dominant tactics during moments of conflict. In stealth scenes, Tess's quick decision-making style would give the player the opportunity to wait less and apply more pressure. In contrast, scenes where Joel proceeds alone would be much rarer, and the player would often have to act according to the positions directed by Tess and the windows of opportunity she created. Ellie's role in the gameplay would also change. While in Part 1, Ellie gradually takes on an active role alongside the player, in this universe, Tess's dominance would also reduce Ellie's mechanical contributions. Ellie would cease to be a character who saves Joel and would instead become someone who needs to be protected more. So, the player might have been inclined to trust Tess over Ellie, especially in dangerous areas. This would weaken the sense of a Joel-Ellie team and make the Tess-Joel duo the central axis of the gameplay. Of course, the greatest strength of this alternate universe would be offering the story a completely different direction and a more rational sense of hope. Instead of the original game's emotional weight, a more mission-focused, more calculated world shaped by Tess's presence would emerge. A more mission-focused, more calculated world would emerge.
But let's be realistic. In this scenario, that unforgettable bond between Joel and Ellie would weaken.
The second chance theme built on love and loss would disappear.
And the emotional depth that makes The Last of Us so unique would be replaced by a colder, more conventional narrative.
When you think about it, Tess's survival could set the story on a more logical course and make the universe more orderly. But at the same time, it would diminish the devastating impact of the original narrative and the emotional resonance that leaves a lasting impression on us. Ultimately, in this scenario, Ellie would lose her life. We would never see her grow step by step, nor witness Joel rebuild his identity and emotions. We would never experience that profound transformation that extends into Part 2. And at this very point, it's worth remembering a quote from the series creator Neil Druckmann. Love can push a character to perform heroic acts, but that same love can also turn them into the most terrifying monster. The Last of Us, Part 1 had us choose to burn the world for love.
This scenario, on the other hand, has us choose to bury love for the world.
So, what do you think? If Tess had survived, would Joel's decision regarding Ellie have changed? Or do you also believe that Tess's tragedy was an inevitable loss that triggered Joel's character development? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you want to see more of these alternate scenarios, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
I can buy you some time, but you have to run. Make this easy for me.
I can find
No, just go!